Hi, my name is Caitlin, and I'm an attorney with Murray Osorio. Today, I'm going to be walking you through how to sponsor your spouse for a green card. So this process is slightly different depending on whether your spouse is here in the United States or whether they're abroad. The process does differ for spouses and fiancés. So today I'm only talking about spouses, people you are legally, or the person you are legally married to. So for this process, either a lawful permanent resident, so a green card holder in the United States, or a US citizen can follow this process. And I'll highlight a couple of differences for those categories. So step one is the same, whether your spouse is here in the USA or abroad. Step one is going to be to file your form I-130. And there's also an additional form, the I-130A, which is just information about the spouse, the foreign spouse. So in the I-130, you want to include evidence that your marriage is bona fide, so real and true, and that you didn't enter into it just for the purpose of getting an immigration benefit. So with your I-130, you want to make sure to include your marriage certificate, also divorce certificates from previous marriages for both parties. And in terms of evidence, the evidence that you want to use to show that your marriage is bona fide, so real and true, can be, for example, birth certificates of your shared children, deeds to property that you jointly own, mortgage payments, rent payments, anything like that. You also want to submit proof that you reside together. So an important thing is to make sure that the addresses on your driver's licenses match. So if one of them is out of date, go update it so that it's clear that you guys have the same address. Another way of showing shared residence is official mail addressed to you, to each of you or both of you together at that same address. I will say that if you do not reside with your spouse, the I-130 process can be pretty difficult. And if that's your situation, I definitely recommend you talk to a lawyer before filing the I-130 so that your evidence is convincing. You can also submit proof of shared finances. I personally think this is really good evidence in conjunction with shared property or shared rent payments. You can submit proof of joint bank accounts, credit card statements, insurance, and retirement plans. Hopefully this goes without saying, but you want to make sure that if you have a joint account, you two are actually using the joint account. So if, for example, if you have a joint credit card, but neither of you uses it, don't submit months of blank statements. If you, for example, actually do keep separate finances, so you don't have a shared bank account, you don't have a shared credit card account, then think more creatively. Do you, for example, have one person pay rent and one person pays groceries? Then perhaps you can show that one person is paying the rent on the house, the other person is paying the groceries, maybe on individual credit card statements, receipts. A lot of couples also will Venmo each other. So for example, if I pay the rent and my spouse, he maybe Venmos me half for the rent. So those Venmo transactions or PayPal or whatever you use, showing that you guys are sending money back and forth regularly. Also, not all officers like this. Some officers will look at it, some won't. Photos of you together in various locations with a variety of people. And I particularly like to submit some letters of support from friends and family and testing that they know the two of you, that your relationship is real and true. And I like those letters to come from some of the people that you've highlighted in your photos. You can also submit screenshots of conversations between you and your spouse. So maybe if you text, you can do that. If you WhatsApp, you can do that. Don't submit dirty messages. USCIS doesn't want to see that. Nobody needs you to prove that part of your relationship. You can just include the sort of more boring ones, like my mom is coming over on Saturday. Can you pick up milk? That type of thing. You can also include flight tickets, hotel reservations for vacations, and shared travel together. So step two, this is where things get different depending on whether your spouse is here in the United States or whether they're abroad. So if your spouse is in the USA, and entered on a visa and is otherwise admissible, which we won't get into, but it's a good idea to chat with a lawyer before filing for a green card, okay? But you may be able to file their Form I-485, an adjustment of status, a green card application at the same time as you file the I-130. And so this speeds up the process, okay? US citizens can generally do this, assuming that the spouse is admissible. And sometimes permanent residents can also do it depending on what's happening with something called the visa bulletin, which we're not going to get into. All right, so this green card application allows your spouse to get his or her green card without leaving the United States. And again, I'm just going to highlight, I highly recommend you chat with an attorney about this part because a lot of different factors can complicate it, and your spouse may be ineligible without you knowing it. So when you submit this, let's assume everything's good. You also need to prove that you can financially support your spouse, and your spouse will also have to do a medical exam and potentially get some vaccinations. Eventually, you and your spouse will be called together for an interview. So the two of you will go to an interview. An officer will ask you some questions about your relationship. I'm going to do a separate interview on how to best prepare for this type of interview. After the interview, hopefully all went well and the officer will approve your case and your spouse will get his or her green card in the mail. However, if your spouse is abroad, this is a different process. USCIS will be the organization that, or the entity that approves the I-130. So you're gonna have to wait until the I-130 is approved. And then, assuming it's approved, USCIS will send your case to the National Visa Center, who will, after some time, contact you to pay fees, fill in some more forms online, upload some more documents, again, including proof that you can financially support your spouse. Eventually, your spouse will be called for an interview at the US Embassy or consulate in their country. They'll also have to do a medical exam there, which you will receive instructions for. And again, we're going to talk about the specifics of these interviews in another video. And then hopefully that consular officer approves your spouse and he or she can come to the United States. So very generally, that is a high-level overview of the process and what you can expect when sponsoring your spouse for a green card. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, call our office for a consultation. And if you mention that you found us on YouTube, we will offer you half off your consultation. All right.